great teams. Let's make some assumptions here. We assumed coming into the playoffs that when the Clippers are fully healthy, they're real good. They were 12-1 this year when fully stacked. Well, Patrick Beverley hasn't played the last 3 games. Kawhi is still great. That assumption was great. They were good in close games. That's been the story all year. And when they're healthy, they're good. They're not right now perfectly healthy. Patrick Beverley gives them 26 minutes a night. He's not healthy. But most of the assumptions are true. The assumptions for the Dallas Mavericks are great coach, terrific young player, not very good in close games, all offense, no defense, and would be interesting to watch with no playoff experience. Those are all true except one exception. Let's explain the whole series. Luka hit a 30-footer at the buzzer. If he doesn't, it's 3-1 Clippers. And they're going to close the series out without Patrick Beverley playing and Paul George playing as bad as I've ever seen him. And they'd still lead 3-1. That's the series, a shot. Everything we assumed is true. I mean, the reality is first-round playoff series are tough. Remember the 2008 Celtics? That's one of the last great teams. They had a great year. They won 67 games. They won a title. They were pushed to 7 games by the Atlanta Hawks in the first round. The Hawks were an 8 seed. They had Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, Rajon Rondo, potentially 4 Hall of Famers, Doc Rivers, one of the best singular year teams we've had in the last 20 years. Pushed to 7 by the Hawks. By the way, they had another series that year in the playoffs, went to 7 games. The Heatles, last year the Raptors, trailed in 3 different series. 3! And they won. This stuff's not easy. I mean, LeBron against the East in the first round has historically been a sweep. But the East has been garbage at the bottom. It's been Washington's and Detroit's and Orlando's. You're not sweeping people generally in the first round of the West. The West is better. And there's also 2 factors that we have to acknowledge here. There's no home court advantage. It's a bubble. So these games, you'd have started out first 2 games in L.A. It's not the way it works. So it's an advantage for the underdog team where there's no home court advantage, and Luka hit a 30-footer. Clippers are the better team. Clippers are going to win the series. But there's no, what are the assumptions? What assumption here has not, we knew the Clippers were very good when they're fully healthy. They're not. Patrick Beverley hasn't played in 3 games. We know Kawhi is still the best get a basket, get a stop guy in the NBA. I still think he is. LeBron may be more valuable. I think Kawhi get a bucket or get a stop's better. Hall of Fame head coach, great bench. Lou Williams had 36 last night. What of that is a surprise? What for Dallas is a surprise? We knew they could score. We knew they were great offensively. We knew Rick Carlisle was smart. We knew they had a bunch of shooters. We knew they didn't play any defense. They still don't. And we knew Luka was good, really good. But, I mean, there's no big shocks here. Paul George is really playing poorly. Paul George will be fine. Paul George, here's my promise. He'll play really well. One of the next 2 games, he'll look like an all-star. But this idea that everybody just runs through the playoffs. Raptors trailed in 3 of their series last year. The Celtics went 8 games with the 8th-seeded Atlanta Hawks. The Heatles struggled off. I mean, if you go to the Miami Heat games, first year they lost the title. Second year they were wonderful. Third year they were lucky to win it. Ray Allen shot. And 4th year they got whacked. This is hard for the great teams. We look at the war. Maybe it's because we're coming off the Warriors dynasty where we just think that this is the way it is. They got one team has all the good players. And do you remember the Warriors lost last year in the final? And the year before, Houston led them. And then Chris Paul got hurt. Remember that? The first year for Golden State, they flew through it. Everything after that was a struggle. Last year, didn't the Warriors with KD, Steph, and Clay last year struggle in the first round against the Clippers? They go like 6 games. This stuff's hard. This is the West. Luka's great. Carlisle's smart. Owner Cuban. This is a real good team. So, we're freaking out. I mean, I just thought, sometimes stuff happens. Luka hits a 30-footer. Here's Doc Rivers.
Honestly, I thought we were very emotionally weak tonight.
Why do you think that is?
If I knew that, I would be Sigmund Freud. But at the end of the day, we're up 20 and we're getting technical fouls. Things like that just give the team juice, We just, throughout, I've been saying this for 3 games now, we're so much better than what we're playing.
They'll figure it out. They'll win the series. They'll be okay. The assumptions are right. But these first-round Western Series and sometimes first couple of rounds Eastern Series have never been easy for the favorites. It's a lot of work. It was work for the Warriors after their first year with KD, Steph, and Clay. They couldn't stay healthy. They infighting. It's tough. It's always been tough. All right, let's shift gears to this. Earl Thomas, voted off the team by Raven players, is looking for a job somewhere. I'm sure he'll get it. There's always a team looking for talent. He's got it. But I tell my kids this all the time. There are real victims in America. You may have a bad day. You may have a bad boss. You may not like dad for a day. We are not victims. Millionaire football players are not victims. It's always been the thing about Earl Thomas that drives me nuts. He flipped off Pete Carroll in Seattle because he wasn't treated fairly. Let's revisit the Seattle years where Pete Carroll drafted him over Taylor Mays, the more hype safety out of USC, and people couldn't believe it. Then Pete built a defense around him for 9 years. And then Pete, halfway through it, pushed for a contract extension that made him the highest paid safety at the time in the NFL. He flipped him off out the door. Then he goes to Baltimore, where last year, in his first year after they beat Seattle, he called it the sweetest victory of all time. The following week, he no-showed. Didn't show up for the team playing home, no-showed on Monday and Tuesday meetings. This guy has been drafted by Pete Carroll, maybe the most player-friendly coach ever. Then goes to John Harbaugh. Should be noted, they wrestled him away from Andy Reid. So the three teams that he either has been on or almost been on are Pete Carroll, Andy Reid, and John Harbaugh. John Harbaugh also one of the most player-friendly coaches of all time. And both kicked him out. Both didn't want him in the end. He had a personal issue, wife, gun, orgy, blah, blah, blah. Don't want to go into it. He said it was nobody's business. But when you're a star in the NFL and paid what you're paid, organizations do worry about your chaos and stability at home. It's something, not everything, but it is sort of their business. Just like my bosses would like to know if, I was falling apart at home, like a little heads up. But what's driven me crazy about Earl Thomas forever is he thought he was treated poorly by Seattle. Are you kidding me? Pete Carroll chose you over Taylor Mays. The contract extension made you the highest paid safety. They gave you free reign, marketed you, promoted you, supported you, and you flipped them off. And then Baltimore has done nothing but surround you in that secondary. They brought over Jalen Ramsey. They got more pass rushers. They asked you to figure out their system, which is reportedly more complex than the Seahawks defense. Whatever. But there's no victim here. He was voted off by players. And Seattle finally had enough. Somebody will pick him up. But racing to Instagram, which is what he did, to say, hey, this wasn't me. I was trying to be. The book has been written on Earl Thomas. Not saying he doesn't deserve another job, but when your first two employers are John Harbaugh and Pete Carroll, and the Ravens in Seattle, two of the best owned, run, supportive franchises in the league, and they're both done with you, you're not the victim in this one. That is a player's dream in the NFL. I get Pete Carroll, potentially Andy Reid, and then John Harbaugh wrestles him away from Andy Reid in free agency. That's a player's dream. Pete Carroll and John Harbaugh are a player's, maybe Mike Tomlin would be the only other coach as a defensive player. You'd be like, I want to end up with Mike Tomlin. So the book's been written completely on Earl Thomas. He'll get picked up. There's always a desperate team, a lousy team, a team that thinks they're a championship team that isn't, that'll overpay. Coming up next, so Philadelphia, the Sixers, it's all been nonsense. The marketing, the process, it's all been nonsense. And they're going to fire their coach. I'll be the only person that will offer a little support for Brett Brown because I think it's an NBA issue that nobody ever addresses. That's coming up. What do you get when you cross a Mercedes-Benz SUV with a race car? When you combine the sleek shapeliness of a coupe with the raw power of F1 engineering. You get chills, You get goosebumps. You get mercy. Driving performance.
Rent the right tools